Ole Miss is already turning that Georgia beatdown into recruiting commitments. We'll explain.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. Today we're talking about how Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels are capitalizing on last Saturday's big win over the Georgia Bulldogs, not just on the field, but in recruiting as well, with some big commitments already locked in and a possible flip from Caleb Cunningham just weeks before early signing day. This could be a huge recruiting week for Ole Miss. The buzz is high, and it's setting up a strong future heading into the 2026 class with even more flips and commitments on the horizons. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy offer great perspectives on the SEC, college football, and heck, even Ole Miss. So check them out for your second listen on the channel. You can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Ole Miss's beatdown of the Georgia Bulldogs, and I'm going to call it a beatdown. It was a 3-score win. Georgia's calling their win over Texas a blowout. They won by 15. Everybody's talking like it was a blowout. So 18 points is greater than 15 points. It was a blowout. So Ole Miss blew out the Georgia Bulldogs, and that was the biggest recruiting weekend of the year for Ole Miss. Any recruit that had any interest whatsoever in Ole Miss was in town, including Caleb Cunningham. Deuce Knight made a visit into town as well. They had plenty of players in the 2026 class. Shakai Mills-Knight was there. Andrew Maddox, all of those guys, they're all coming up to Oxford as well. So Ole Miss got them. They got the big win, and then after the game, all of a sudden the buzz started flowing. There was almost instant reaction. A lot of recruits who had never had a chance to storm a field in their life, they got to storm the field. We saw a video of Deuce Knight doing just that as well. My opinion on Deuce Knight is Deuce Knight, after seeing Austin Simmons and what he did, that's probably problematic for Ole Miss. Whenever you see somebody that looks that good going against that defense as a redshirt freshman, and playing time is important, and why you're doing what you're doing, I don't know if Ole Miss at this point needs to put their eggs in the Deuce Knight basket, but Deuce Knight was very impressed with Ole Miss. I think at the end of the day, playing time might win out there. But Caleb Cunningham, we're going to talk about him as a potential flip. Steve Wiltfong from On3 and Chad Simmons and Tom Loy from 24/7, they all put in flip crystal balls or RPMs or whatever they call it for Caleb Cunningham to flip his commitment to the Ole Miss Rebels. Now, he hasn't done it yet, but the momentum is heading that direction. Caleb Cunningham always has a big bump after his Ole Miss visits. He visited with George McDonald. Lane Kiffin obviously is recruiting the heck out of him, as is Charlie Weiss, Kelvin Bolden. All those guys are doing a fantastic job on Caleb Cunningham. And make no mistake, if Caleb Cunningham flips to Ole Miss, it is because of that drive that Austin Simmons put on in the first quarter that turned all of the momentum of that game around and how good it looked. It is going to be that reason that Ole Miss is able to flip Caleb Cunningham, because let's be real, Caleb Cunningham is a 5-star receiver. If you look at him on On3, ESPN, and Rivals, he's rated as about the highest 4-star that you can possibly be, but he's a 5-star on 24/7 Sports, and he's a 5-star on the consensus as well. Listed as the number 17 wide receiver in the entire country, the number 1 player in Mississippi, and the number 2 wide receiver. Everybody was recruiting against Ole Miss talking about, well, after Jaxson Dart leaves, after he's gone, Well, they don't have anything. You're going to take a step back. Ole Miss is going to go back to being Ole Miss after Jaxson Dart leaves, and Austin Simmons going in against the Georgia Bulldogs defense proves that just simply is not the case. And he looked absolutely fantastic. Listen, Caleb Cunningham is a big-time wide receiver, 6'2", 180, 190 pounds. He is a prototypical outside wide receiver that Ole Miss honestly has made a living off of over the last 15 or so years, starting with Dante Moncrief, who was from the 2011 recruiting class, I believe. Laquan Treadwell was the next one. A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, those guys. And DK being on the Jumbotron and Aiden Williams and all of this happening, Jordan Watkins breaking the all-time receiving record. There was everything going in Ole Miss's favor to land Caleb Cunningham. And then the Rebels went and pulled off that upset. They stormed the field. It was great. It was an unbelievable environment against what has been the gold standard of college football over the last couple of years. I think Caleb Cunningham has a chance to come in and start day one when he walks on the field at Ole Miss. And quietly, Ole Miss might be listen, they're going to hit the transfer portal really hard. And Jonte Cook is transferring out of Texas. Jonte Cook took an official visit to Ole Miss the first time that he was being recruited. I saw him at the Under Armour All-American game. He is a prototypical slot type receiver. He is a very good football player. So Ole Miss is going to likely hit the transfer portal hard this season as well. But Ole Miss is in a position to have a very homegrown look to their offensive skill players in 2025 and beyond, with Austin Simmons at quarterback, who was a high school recruit. I think Aiden Williams, if he sticks around at Ole Miss, is going to lock down one of the sides of the fields, and everybody's excited about what he could be. You have, I think Caleb Cunningham will be a day one type starter. You have Caden Lee, who was recruited in the high school recruiting class. There's a lot of skill players. This could be the year the skill player in 2025 taking control of that Ole Miss offense. But the transfer portal is still going to be a large deal that they have to go with. Now, another player that Ole Miss is looking to flip is Dante Core. He is currently committed to Auburn Tigers. Now, Jeffrey Lee, who is an Auburn Tigers guy, is saying that Dante Core is going to flip. That is the news. RPMs and crystal balls and all of that stuff is coming up. He's only a 3-star receiver. But if you look at the highlights of Dante Core, the first thing you notice is this guy is an alpha dog big time. He plays really physical out on the outside. He's out of Fort Walton, Florida. I think Choctawhatchee High School in Fort Walton Beach. He's a guy that is extremely physical, excellent ball skills. He seems like a fairly refined cornerback. Now, I don't know why he is rated as a 3-star instead of a 4-star. I don't know what's going on. I do know that Auburn has had him committed for a very long time, and Ole Miss is fighting for him. And that absolutely says something, because if this type of athletic ability that you see from Dante Core right now is a guy that looks like he's going to be able to get on the field in Pete Golding's defense. Right now, Ole Miss is building a program. That Georgia game was a program-defining win, and Ole Miss is trying to take that to jump to the next level, and you do that through these recruiting bumps. You need this Georgia recruiting bump to happen to lift up what you do in 2025, and of course, this is going to help insanely with the 2026 class, and Ole Miss has already grabbed a commitment from that class. We'll talk about that in the next segment. Ole Miss got a commitment on Monday for that class, about noon. Really good player, by the way, but we'll talk about him in just a little bit. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. After a dominant 3-score win over Georgia, Ole Miss feels like it's turned a corner with big recruiting wins on the horizon and atmosphere that was electrifying recruits. Could this be the start of something special? Stay tuned for all the latest. Ole Miss fans, listen up. You need to download the Roy app right now. You've heard us talk about Roy this season and how they're revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets your NIL money. And here's the thing that I absolutely love about Roy. You get your money back if that player transfers. It's completely safe. Roy is helping us keep our team intact, and it's actually good for the game long term. In Saturday's upset over the Georgia Bulldogs, Austin Simmons led an absolutely massive drive, and everybody knows it. You can show your support for Austin Simmons by depositing a little appreciation into that player's account. To do that, download the Roy app. You can see what the logo looks like if you're just watching on YouTube, or you can go to joinroy.com. Now, let's spotlight the Roy Locked On Player of the Week, and I'm going with Austin Simmons for that drive. I am going to keep harping on this, but this guy is the future and why Roy exists to begin with. We're going to throw some money into his account on Roy. Every contribution counts, 10, 20 bucks, it all adds up, and it's going to help your favorite players stay put. Join me and show some love for Austin Simmons. Download the Roy app or go to joinroy.com today. Use the promo code Locked On. Every athlete from every team is in there, so there's no purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy, support the players, change the game. And I think the Ole Miss turned a corner a little bit in this football game against Georgia. I think the momentum that Ole Miss is going to get on the high school side of recruiting, I think the transfer portal bump with this happening right before the portal window opens up, that is a big deal. The questions that people have about what Ole Miss is going to be in 2025, a lot of that got answered by Austin Simmons and those guys driving the ball down the field. Caden Lee has had an excellent season as well. You have Logan Diggs coming back at running back, potentially as early as Florida. I'm not sure about that, but Lane Kiffin certainly keeps hinting at Logan Diggs and what he could be. And for a potential playoff run, Trey Harris, we'll see what happens there. Ole Miss is peaking at absolutely the right time for them to make a playoff push and for them to make headway in the recruiting game and in the transfer portal game. Listen, it wasn't all about 2025 in this Georgia game. The first commitment that Ole Miss got out of it was actually from Zion Legree from Pensacola, Florida, in Escambia County. It's right up there in the Panhandle as well. He's an athletic guy. I mean, whenever you look at his film, like we will in just a second, he's somebody that you can appreciate what he does on the field. He is super athletic, super confident in himself, and you can see the way he plays the game. Again, he's a 4-star on Rivals. He's a 3-star on 3 and 247. He's not ranked on ESPN because ESPN's the slowest to rank, and they kind of just stay on the current year's class. Listen, he's a really good football player. He's listed as an athlete, and I think that's important because when you watch him play, you see a lot of slot receiver. Honestly, you see a lot of Jonte Cook, if you want to be real about it, in his game. And Zion Legree has a chance to be a really special player. I mean, the Elijah Moore type, those slot receivers. Caden Lee, you saw Ole Miss completely take apart the Georgia Bulldogs, throwing to those inside receivers, inside the hash marks, just finding little pockets of where defensive backs are not going to be. And Ole Miss just completely ate them up. They pass protected. They did all the stuff that you needed to do, and they were able to take apart what he did. Zion Legree, an explosive player. I think he's almost too explosive for high school. And we'll see over the year because, starting the recruiting cycle, it gets interesting, but he's committing to Ole Miss after seeing what the Rebels did this past weekend. Listen, this was a massive, massive win. And we're going to talk about in the next segment what it means for Lane Kiffin. And what that means is he has set down the mantle of offensive genius and just decided to win lots of football games, and he's become an elite head coach. He coached that football game like an elite head coach, and anybody that says otherwise is just agenda-driven and they're lying to you. But he is going to take that into recruiting this year. You can see the way they're attacking recruiting right now. Everybody's trying to just beg, doing the Always Sunny thing with Charlie, doing the Pepe Sylvia, trying to figure out, connect dots that aren't even there to try to desperately get Lane Kiffin out of Ole Miss. And right now, it just doesn't look like it's going to happen. And Ole Miss is really close to joining that next level. And we'll see what happens, because the interesting thing that is going on this year, this is a proof of concept year. And I have said this for 8 months. This was a proof of concept year about the transfer portal. Can you make a playoff run going predominantly through the transfer portal? And what you have is a surging Colorado Buffaloes team that has done their work almost exclusively through the transfer portal. Indiana is sitting top 5 in the country in 1 year using the transfer portal. Ole Miss is potentially in the playoff with 2 more wins going predominantly through the transfer portal. Texas is sitting in the top 5 being a force in the portal. Oregon was a transfer portal force for the last couple of years. The transfer portal has turned into a viable alternative to people recruiting predominantly at the high school level. Teams that have stayed at the high school level, they've almost taken a step back. LSU is probably going to finish the season 9-3 or 8-4, something like that, after they got dog walked by the Alabama Crimson Tide. Georgia has taken a step back, going primarily through high school recruiting. Alabama, they did some transfer portal in this offseason because of the coaching change, but they've taken a step back from where they usually are. Those dominant programs of the past, they don't exist anymore. The transfer portal is the great equalizer. And whenever you mix the portal or high school recruiting with a solid NIL base, you have a chance to do some work in recruiting and changing the personnel of your roster. Ole Miss, in 1 year's time, went from losing to Georgia 52-17 and not looking particularly close to the Georgia Bulldogs to completely dog walking that team. It's one of the reasons that I just get excited about recruiting, because if they're recruiting and they're offered and people are going to take it, be excited about that. But if the player decides he does not want to be there and commits to somewhere else and changes around, I don't make a big deal out about that, because there's other fish in the sea. We'll see. Zion Legree, unbelievably good player. Like I said, he reminds me a lot of Jonte Cook, who is the potential transfer out of Texas. 5-star player. Saw him at the Under Armour game. Really, really good player. There's also a wide receiver, I think, at North Texas right now that's from Corinth, Mississippi, that Ole Miss should keep an eye on if he gets in the portal as well. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. And with the portal getting ready to open up in about 3 or 4 weeks, when all of that's going to start, with the playoff push happening and Ole Miss potentially having a game on December 20th that's in the playoff, either at home in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium or traveling somewhere in the Midwest, because it'll probably be an SEC versus Big Ten game. Honestly, I'd kind of like to see an Ole Miss Alabama game, because I wanted to see this year exactly what that looked like to begin with. But Ole Miss has taken this Georgia game and maximized it to the umpteenth degree. And that's good to see. And these recruiting wins, this bump that Ole Miss is going to get off of it, is absolutely deserved, absolutely worth it. And I'm curious to see exactly how far it goes. Does it stop with Cunningham? Does it add a Deuce Knight? Does it add a Melendez, linebacker out of Osceola County, Florida, in Kissimmee? Is that what's going on? Or like, let's just see exactly how it goes as well. Anyway, coming up on our final segment, we're going to give Lane Kiffin his well-deserved flowers. After a game that wasn't just historic for Ole Miss, it was a turning point for Kiffin himself. He moved from the title of offensive genius to elite head coach, showing a new level of self-awareness and control. No room for mistakes, no self-destruct, just pure elite coaching. Do not miss the biggest story for the Ole Miss this season. Stick around. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. This will be a fun week to sports bet. with the potential Georgia revenge tour against the Tennessee Volunteers on the horizon, and Texas going to Arkansas. That's a big old school Southwest Conference rivalry. It should be a fun weekend, and Ole Miss fans can just sit back and enjoy it with a huge smile on their face. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. It's an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Recruiting is going well. It was a perfect day in Oxford, Mississippi, and a lot of that has to do with the growth of Lane Kiffin. My opinion on Lane Kiffin, and I said earlier in the year that Lane Kiffin has to decide whether he wants to be an offensive genius or an elite football coach. Lane Kiffin made that decision and became an elite football coach that outcoached Kirby Smart in this game. Let me explain what's going on about that. Ole Miss only went for it one time. That was in plus territory. They settled for their field goals, whether it was 4th and 1 or not, because 4th and 1 against Georgia is a trap. It always has been. As much as he probably wanted to go for it on 4th down, he did not. He just took the points because he knew in his heart, he actually believed that the only way that Georgia was going to be able to win this game was as if Ole Miss helped them. If Ole Miss allowed for wild momentum swings, if Ole Miss made it to where the most momentum swing play in college football is being stopped on a 4th down, if that happened, Georgia had a chance to get right, get going, and Ole Miss would have been in a little bit of trouble because that's 4- and 5-star players on the other side of the field. Lane Kiffin didn't do that. In previous games against Alabama and Georgia, they knew that all you had to do against the Lane Kiffin Ole Miss team was to frustrate them and then let them self-destruct. And whenever they self-destruct, take advantage, and they could be behind the 8 ball and the game goes the way you want it to go. They knew that by playing percentages, they could take apart Lane Kiffin. Kirby Smart tried to do that in the game on Saturday. He had the interception, the short field. They got up 7-0. You thought that everything was going to go for yet another disaster in a big-time football game for Lane Kiffin. But what happened? What did Lane Kiffin do? First of all, he had confidence in his man, Austin Simmons, and led a terrific drive down the field and tied the game up. And this was a game that was truly, once we're even, we're leaving. Ole Miss had all the confidence in the world and just took it over. And Lane Kiffin quickly noticed that this defense, the Ole Miss defense, and the Ole Miss defensive line is the best position group on the field playing against Georgia. And it's going to be important to let your best position group win. He knew that they could affect Carson Beck. He knew that they could stop their run game. And as long as something weird didn't happen, he was going to win the football game. And Lane Kiffin, previously in 2021 and before, he would call the offensive game the way he called the offensive game. He would play analytics. You heard me say, Ole Miss in a bowl game in the Texas Bowl played it like a 9-year-old playing Madden. There's been games that have been maddening for Ole Miss fans as Lane Kiffin went through this maturity as a head coach. Lane Kiffin grew up on Saturday. Lane Kiffin became the elite head football coach that he could be because he showed that he had the self-control to let the other team just be dead to the water. You don't have to score 45 points. You don't have to just completely drive and prove to everybody how much of a genius you are on the offensive side of the ball. When you are in a game that they cannot beat you, unless you help them, don't help them. That's simple Sun Tzu. That's simple art of war. When your opponent is defeating himself, do not help them. And Lane Kiffin wouldn't do that. And the way you saw this, Ole Miss used tempo sparingly in this football game. They would go fast from time to time, but mainly they went fast in minus territory. Once they got into plus territory, they throttled down the time really, honestly, precipitously. It was noticeable. And they played a slow game, the tempo drive down. It was one of the first games in Ole Miss history that, not Ole Miss history, but in Lane Kiffin Ole Miss history, that I've noticed Ole Miss being able to play at different tempos at an equally high level. Ole Miss knew they had found something with those routes in the seams of the defense hitting it up. Whenever Georgia played zone, they also had excellent stuff on pressure. You look, it's like, why didn't Georgia pressure? They weren't getting quarterbacks. It was because Lane Kiffin knew it. He had something on tape that he could attack against Georgia's pressure. The pass to Ulysses Bentley early in the game scared the heck out of them. Whenever Ole Miss had a running back there with the speed of Bentley, Georgia was afraid. Schematically, everything was in place for Lane Kiffin to make an impact on this game, and he did. And he did so by not being the offensive genius that we always say that he is. He did so by saying, hey, defense, win the game. You want to talk about the Nick Saban in him? That is what that was. He saw immediately how to win this game and how to take it over, and it was on that defensive line, and it became important not to help the Georgia Bulldogs. If you didn't help the Georgia Bulldogs, they were never going to beat you. That sounds absolutely weird to say, but right now, Ole Miss football is playing like the best team in the country. Seriously. Right now, looking at what's going on, if you told me that Ole Miss was going to win the national championship, I would believe you. I would say, yeah, that makes sense. They had a hiccup early in the season. We've always analyzed that to death, but right now, Ole Miss is playing better than anybody else. Ole Miss has a bye week to get Jaxson Dart a little bit better. He was out there on his robo ankle at the end of the game. Has a bye week to see if Logan Diggs can help out that running game a little bit from time to time and give them some carries, even with Ulysses Bentley, Dominic Thomas, and Rashad Amos. And what they're doing with Jordan Watkins, I am really curious to see what they are going to do there, because I imagine they're going to use that scheme against Florida and against Mississippi State as well. I'm pretty fired up to where Ole Miss sits right now. You're looking at it potentially a home playoff game against a Notre Dame or somebody like that in Indiana, or a road game in South Bend or in Penn State. I mean, it's all falling into place for Ole Miss to have that magical game in the first year of the 12-team playoff and validate everything that I've talked about for the last 9 months. You know, there are a group of people that listen to my show and just discount me automatically that I'm a homer. But they never mention when I'm right. And I'm right a good bit about this team for being a homer. The reason I'm right is because even though I love Ole Miss and I am an unabashed fan of what's going on, I can also see what's happening. And I understand the game just enough to be dangerous. So Ole Miss in this playoff run, it could be a lot of fun. With Ole Miss getting ready for that opening playoff game, the transfer portal and all of that, my channel is going to be doing fantastic during the month of December if Ole Miss can beat Florida and Mississippi State. But it is also going to validate every single thing I have said for the last 9 months. And it's very, very bad day for the haters of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, because that validation is going to bring more people in to watch the show, because we have a good time. The whole business model of this show is to make Ole Miss sports fun again. And we try to do that each and every single day. Yeah. So we'll see exactly what happens. I figure tonight we're going to move our live show to 7:30 Central Time, 8:30 Eastern Time to match up with the college football playoff ranking show. We'll go ahead and react to that as well. So stick around for that. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, exciting news, you're becoming Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It's our texting program that sends you notifications on anything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube, we are going to send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.